Welcome to this week's OK at Work with myself, Sarah Sawyer, and my colleague Russell Berger with Offit Kurman's Employment Group. So this week we're talking about selling your business. So I've had a fair amount of clients come to me recently who are looking at their house, seeing if things are in order, both from a transactional standpoint as far as their business organization structure and what it takes to sell their business or get out or make certain moves, but also from the employment side of trying to say, all right, well, what are my potential issues here when a buyer is looking at my business. And that's often a big part of the due diligence process is taking a look at any liabilities or exposures involving employees. So what do people typically look at, Russell?
Yeah, I mean, and this is pretty important because obviously it can affect the purchase price. It can affect the amount, how to escrow it. It can affect how much you ultimately walk away with from the business. So, from that standpoint, I think the focus is largely on the things that create the biggest liabilities, the biggest risk. So that's things like, are your wage and hour policies in order, or are we going to get hit with, a massive class action for unpaid overtime? After this transaction concludes. So making sure you have those kinds of policies in place is really important. Um, and really like kind of one way to do a litmus test on that is the handbook. So certainly during any kind of due diligence, the other side's probably going to be looking at your employee handbook. And so you want to have something that's compliant and just demonstrates that I'm the kind of company, I'm the kind of business that does things the right way, has a plan, has documented, and you can feel confident that I'm doing all these other things in the right way too.
Yeah. Another one we see too a lot is classification issues. And then obviously you mentioned wage and hour. I mean, just pay practices, digging into making sure that you're accounting how you're paying your employees, the benefits that you're providing them, if you're complying with state law, and just really making sure everything looks squeaky clean and that there's not any potential issues sitting there. Do you have employment agreements in place? Are there non-competes in place? Are those compliant? So what does that workforce look like? And what are your obligations to your workforce? What have you promised them? And what protections do you have in place to make sure that your confidential information is taken care of? And non-competes, non-solicitations, those kinds of things can all have a lot of value.
Yeah, I mean, you make a really good point there with the restrictive covenants, because if you think about it from the buyer's perspective, they're buying your business, they're buying your goodwill, they're buying your customer list. So they're going to want to make sure that the assets that they're purchasing or the business that they're taking over is protected in that way. And if it isn't, they're going to make you do it anyway. So that's a really important thing to be out in front on as well. And one of the other things, and I know Sarah, you and I have done a little bit of this, as employment counsel in some transactions, is you end up looking at kind of like the employment litigation history, because if an employer has frequent lawsuits, frequent disputes, frequent settlements, which might be looked at as well, then it stands to reason that they probably don't have the greatest employment policies. So all the things that we've talked about on this program repeatedly about keeping yourself out of trouble and not getting into lawsuits, and these are the steps you need to take to do that. That matters when you're talking about exiting a company as well.
Yeah. This is why it's good to just to make sure you've got a good plan in place up front, as you're setting up your business, even, especially if you think that down the road you might sell the business, which is an often a thing, right? So most people don't plan to be in their business until the day they die. So some of it's succession planning. Maybe you don't sell, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on. Even if you're not looking to sell tomorrow, even if it's in a couple of years, that's a good time to be proactive and get ahead of these things, both for your own sake, so that you're not dealing with a huge liability right as you're trying to exit, especially if the reason you're trying to exit is age. So you really don't want to all of a sudden you're all excited to move to Florida and enjoy your retirement, and you realize that you're about to get slammed with a wage and hour lawsuit and no one's going to want your business, or you're going to have to take a huge haircut on that. So something to really start thinking about and be proactive on ahead of time, I would say.
Yeah, and the business lawyers and the business brokers will tell you how long the cycle is for ramping up to and actually selling a business. Um, But, I'll say in Maryland anyway, the statute of limitations on a lot of employment claims is 3 years. So, if you want to clear the decks, it's probably something that, you start thinking about 3 years before your intended transaction. So that way, like you get your house in order and you plan for it and then you have an opportunity for some of these things we're talking about to really take hold and let that foundation set.
Yeah. Yeah, awesome. Well, all really great things to think about, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Sarah.